else moves around.
Are you ready, Matthias?
Yeah, I'm all fine here.
All right, good. So let's get this started. Over to you.
Thank you. I hope my internet works anyway. So let me know if I drop out. Ha ha ha. But okay. Yes, I did this presentation for a group that Jonas assembled in Oslo a few weeks back, and it is really an interesting topic. I think, from my perspective, in the open source world, we've seen a lot of open washing coming earlier, and I think that one of the things that we're seeing coming in now as well is what you could call digital sovereignty washing. Businesses trying to play down certain areas of digital sovereignty. But yes, so I made this presentation. I've extended it slightly, but I find that generally this is a very interesting discussion topic too. So I hope that we get some time at the end to talk about this topic too. Briefly about myself, I'm Mathias Bolt Lesniak. I'm from outside Oslo in Norway, where I'm speaking to you from now. I do have a wife and 2 kids, and I have been using TYPO3 since 2003, and I'm also the project ambassador for our CMS. Very briefly about TYPO3, the CMS as well. It's a PHP-based content management system, free and open source, very much driven around the community contribution, and backed by a non-profit association, membership association that also has a for-profit company where Daniel Fau here is the CEO. And we're also the choice of the Germans, or the Germans. And the German federal government selected us as their default CMS, which really brings us into that whole field with digital sovereignty, because digital sovereignty is something that people started talking about mostly from the perspective of government, but one of the things we're trying from the TYPO3 side anyway is to broaden that topic and talk about it from other sides as well. Like I did in Oslo, I'm going to start briefly also by a slightly off-topic thing, but I think it really exemplifies some of the problems that we have to deal with when it comes to digital sovereignty. A very good example that I found recently is the question of, is your AI trained on the King James Bible? And you might say, well, how do I care? What's important about that? But it's one of these things that we come to when we use services. We don't know what an AI is trained on. We don't know where the data is sent, whether it's training on what you're using it for, stuff like that. But the good example with the King James Bible is that if you train your AI on that Bible and it outputs something, it doesn't really matter for most people in most of the world. Anything that it outputs from that Bible will be not subject to copyright, because that Bible is in the public domain most places, except from in the United Kingdom, where it's under Crown copyright. And that's one of these examples of how between countries and regions, cultures, there can be differences that we are not aware of. And it can affect us differently depending on exactly how we're trading. And it's been easy to deal with this when we're all dealing with, a single country and a single culture, but it's getting more and more difficult to actually find out where we are pulling our content from and where it's being output. That leads us on to digital sovereignty. Let's start with a very simple introduction to the topic, what digital sovereignty is. Very often when I hear people talk about digital sovereignty, what they actually talk about is data sovereignty. But data sovereignty is just a small part of what digital sovereignty really is. Because digital sovereignty in itself is the ability to act independently on all digital matters without undue influence from third parties. And that concept in itself consists of two things. Data sovereignty is one of them, but there's also digital governance, which is your ability to regulate your actions and control how your digital operations and policies and infrastructure are set up. It's that, so data sovereignty is, the data that you have, being able to say where it is, that you can get it out to the solution, that you can reuse it, stuff like that. But in addition to that data, it's really this thing of being in control of your entire digital solution space. And that's quite big. I mean, that's a lot more than data sovereignty. And it really brings you into those areas of the King James Bible where, do I really know what my digital platform is? And you can say that there is no digital sovereignty without data sovereignty and digital governance. So you have to have those two things in order to really have digital sovereignty. Data sovereignty, on the other side, is possible without full digital sovereignty. And I think that is one of the reasons why we're seeing a bit of digital sovereignty washing at the moment, that it is very easy to provide the data sovereignty, but the digital governance is very hard for someone to provide to you. That is something that you have to ensure yourself. And as I said, digital sovereignty is often talked about in a government context. I think governments are the ones that have the easiest job. It might cost billions, but it's easiest for them to achieve real digital sovereignty. But you also have businesses and organizations. The talk that I did with this presentation a few weeks back was at the Red Cross in Oslo. And they're, of course, an organization that very much needs digital sovereignty for a lot of their operations. But we as individuals also have a need for digital sovereignty. But I think if we say that the government has the most possibility to really become digitally sovereign, businesses and organizations and individuals only have a certain possibility to do it. Me as an individual, it would take a lot of work and money for me to set up every server locally in my house, make sure that I can manage and control all of my data everywhere. It's slightly easier for businesses and organizations, but they still have a hard time reaching proper governance of their digital infrastructure. And an example is this screenshot here. It's a Google translated version of an article that Jana sent me, a couple of years back, that really demonstrates this lack of control over your own digital infrastructure. In this case, the Danish libraries have been using library software from Microsoft for years and years. And Microsoft has been seeing libraries as non-profits. And I think we all agree that libraries do not lend out books for profit. That's really not what they do. They're a proper non-profit that benefits people. And however, Microsoft decided at one point that they would revoke the status of non-profit for libraries. And I don't know why, but that meant that these libraries were suddenly forced to pay, what was it, 40,000 euros a year in licensing costs for running their library software. And there's quite a lot of books that they can't buy and lend out in that price. And that's what can happen when you don't control your digital tools. Things can get expensive, they can disappear things can happen to them. And another good example of that is really relevant for the situation that we're seeing in the world today. Here's a more recent cutting from a newspaper in Norway. I translated it, but it's really a big issue at the moment in Oslo, where they have bought new electric buses from China. And people are asking, well, what happens? Can China turn off these buses remotely? And the answer is yes, absolutely. They can. They might say that they won't, but we're in a situation in the world today where we don't know. We don't know what might happen with our software today. And there's a lot of different pieces of software, not only for buses, that you can finally suddenly find have been turned off, or you haven't paid the license fee, or something has changed and suddenly you don't have access to the software that you're using every day, and that's critical for your business. And in this case, for buses, the example is really out there already, because when the Russians attacked Ukraine a few years back, they stole a lot of tractors from Ukraine, and John Deere tractors, and they were driven off to far away in Russia, but John Deere centrally could turn off those tractors and make them impossible to drive. And that's really the question that we have to ask ourselves today. Can someone take important infrastructure and turn it off? Well, that's a good example of a lack of digital sovereignty. And for your business, it's a question of, can you be certain that if something changes in the world or with your business, can you still do what you need to do in order to run your business? Another example is in relation to data sovereignty, but really control over how data is managed. And something that's come up a lot lately is how the EU enforces GDPR when data is transferred to the United States. And under the Biden administration, Biden made a presidential order that enforced a type of handling of data that the EU found was good and suitable and compliant with the GDPR. Unfortunately, now there's a new president who uses presidential orders in quite a different way, and this is then not really put into law in the United States. It's up to the whim of the president, more or less, how European data is handled when it's in the United States. And now Max Schrems, who have sued the EU a number of times already, is now in his third court case about how whether or not this EU-US data regulation is actually compliant with GDPR. So even the thing of thinking that your data is safe because there is some kind of legal framework protecting it isn't necessarily the same as saying that you have full control over your data. And that really makes me ask this question of, what is your digital sovereignty status really? What is it like for you as an individual? What is it like for your business? And maybe also importantly, what is it like for the customers of your business? Are you contributing to their digital sovereignty? Are you making it easier? Are you making it harder? And that's the place where I would like to stop today and hear from you guys. What is your digital sovereignty status today? So thank you.
Thank you, Mathias. You both gave us a little bit of a eye-opener with the Bible and then some tangible examples. Thank you very much for that, helping also define this topic, which I do agree with your beginning statement on. There's a little bit of digital sovereignty washing going on at the moment. But let's hear from others. Perhaps if you go back one slide, if you don't mind.
I will do that.
to help us keep in mind. Yeah.
What happened here? There we
So
go.
what's your digital sovereignty status? David at HCL, would you mind starting?
Okay. So it's interesting you're quite right. I tend to think about this in terms of data residency and the legal status of the companies that are providing service. So, for example, Ionos is having a good moment right now. But one of the things that we've experienced, and I'd be interested in your comments on it and those of others, is when you come to rely on a piece of software which is owned by a corporation, like the Microsoft example you were saying, it starts out as open source. So an example might be Elastic or Mongo or something, where the license is really open source from a kind of commercial perspective, and the license then changes along the way, right? And the direction of travel of the world is perhaps away from some of those more free to access software, because it can be used to train AIs and so on. I'm interested in your experiences with that type of digital sovereignty, right? Where, not so much state actors as corporate actors, and corporate actors in the open source world.
I can give a quick answer from TYPO3's perspective first, and it would be interesting to hear other people as well on that, because it is maybe one of the sides of the open washing that I also mentioned, that we have seen a number of examples of open source software changing licenses or being bought up by a VC firm and changing licenses into a way that doesn't really support the open source credo. I think the CRM Mautic, which is an open source CRM, did a lot of research into that when they set up their governance structure a year or two back, that they tried to set up a structure where it would be impossible for a VC firm or anyone really to change the license. That's the foundation of how they do things. That's also what we try to do in TYPO3, but it really comes up to, who's really in control even of open source software today.
Thank you. Sarge?
Yes, it's not so much a question, but I'm based in Switzerland, and we had some really big issues with the government itself, because it was looking at getting out of the business of hosting cloud services themselves, and they wanted to work with other cloud providers. And here, all the big American companies started, promoting themselves: Microsoft, AWS, Google. And the Swiss government actually shortlisted them, and none of them realized. I mean, the government did not realize that there are actual laws that make it possible for the U.S. government to have access to the data and that's hosted by an American company in other countries. And so that was one of the biggest issues that all the Swiss cloud providers raised and said, you have to be very careful. And so you have to be aware of these things, and you have to be careful. So even the Swiss government was not properly, thinking about this digital sovereignty that you're mentioning. And I'm guessing other governments might fall into the same traps. And it's a big issue.
Chris?
Yeah, I just really wanted to echo what Sergey was saying there around the Swiss government. I work a lot with French organisations, and the French often will see where they won't work with AWS, Azure, GCP because they want French vendors. It also makes it increasingly difficult when looking at open source technology, and you can have the infrastructure, but then where do you stop? You start adding things like the CDN, and where does that go, and where's the endpoint, where's all that stored, and then how you solve all that is, I don't think anyone's really completely nailed it.
Yes, I shared in the chat an example of the city of Aarhus moving from US cloud providers to European. So I think that would be in the data sovereignty box that you're ticking, right, Mathias?
Mm. Yeah.
Still, it's a big exercise. It's also a lot of money. but Esther also shared what Switch are doing for education and research. Any other comments, reflections on this question?
I mean, Janis, I think it comes down to what our objective is here, right? I mean, do we want to exit from any kind of American or Chinese bit of technology, right? I mean, in the end, it's a risk management problem, right? I mean, you use Red Hat Linux in your servers, and it's a flavor that's maintained by an American company. Does that matter? Maybe not, right? There's a proportionality element in this that we could easily lose sight of in amongst all the froth that is in the news headlines right now.
Yes. Mathias?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen things that this reminds me of in for example, African countries where the best way to be reached is to have for a minister to have a Gmail email account, because the email account of the ministry is not working most of the time, and for businesses, for example, in Europe today, I think the question is not, can we be 100% digitally sovereign? That's probably utopian, but it's a question of, well, if push comes to shove, what can we manage without? What of the essential infrastructure is digitally sovereign?
Yes, and before I hand it over to those who raised their hand, I saw also we had a question from Toronto. I think it was asking if you have any guidance, Mathias, or anybody else on the call in terms of organizational size. When does this matter? Is there a lens like you would apply on this, Mathias?
No, I think it applies to everyone. I mean, if you're one person, a freelancer, and you lose access to software that is business critical, or you as an individual lose access to things that might be necessary for you and your livelihood, that's just as important as for large businesses.
Yes. So let's take three who have raised their hands, and then we'll circle back to you, Mathias. Okay. So Esther first.
What we see in the education and research space, it's really a tension triangle between digital sovereignty or data sovereignty, price, costs, and the third part is more features and usability. And I think it's there is no one size fits all. It really depends on the use case and also on the organization where they put the bar in this tension triangle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. We'll go from Switzerland to Germany. Jam?
Hey, everyone. I was at FOSS Backstage a few weeks ago, and I was just at DrupalCon. And I have to say, at FOSS Backstage, I think 60 or 70% of every hallway conversation and presentation was on this topic. And Jutta Hossmann was there from the Zendis in Germany, and she's working on she's part of the team creating the cloud office functionality completely hosted in Germany, and working on the Docs solution that the German and French governments are making to replace Google Docs. And I think we finally have a chance in Europe to, a proper motivation, not just to sit back and let the Americans or whomever give us all this cool stuff for free, but with all these conditions attached. So I actually have really high hopes that we can sort of develop our own equivalent of hyperscalers who might work with more respect for humans and privacy, and we can keep our economic efforts generating value in Europe. So I'm excited about the opportunity too.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing from your travels. Mahesh, in the UK.
Hi, sorry I'm late. That was the main reason for putting my hand up. I was just delayed on another call. But actually, interesting topic. So if some of you, I know Janis quite well, obviously, but I know a few others. I was recently at the CDDO, which is part of the Government Digital Service in the UK. I was working there last year, and this is the one big topic that kept coming up time and time again. And there's various conversations in terms of developing a common data platform and the interfaces to access that data. But every time the conversation about who owns that data and where it's stored came up, it kind of I shouldn't say too much, but it went a bit quiet. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, and particularly on health data, as some of you know, the UK economy might know that, you know, this is increasingly getting encroached by, if not already overtaken by US companies. So really interesting topic, and something I'll keep an eye on. Nothing much to offer back, I'm afraid, in terms of any wisdom.
Oh, it's good to see you. We'll go to Toronto, one extra stop, and then back to you, Mathias. Okay, so Justin.
Hey guys, nice to see some of you again virtually. Sorry, I'm off camera. I'm commuting. I guess this is a question. First of all, this is incredibly fascinating, and I loved it. Question is there? It strikes me that there would be a need for some kind of centrally governed body with overall governing principles, guidelines, data interoperability. Essentially an open schema of sorts, that if we're truly going to establish data sovereignty, a set of principles that would be adhered to regardless of cloud provider, the server locations there, Mathias' home, is such a governing body, like being is such a thing in existence now? Is this something you folks are seeing? Like, how is that? This is an open question.
Sure. Thank you, Justin. And while you think, Mathias, perhaps now, if you don't mind, you can go one slide forward. It's also an easy way for everybody to continue the conversation directly with Mathias. I will share the slides later. I will share also, put Mathias on copy on the email, but let's wrap up over to you, Mathias, with both perhaps reflections, answers to Justin's and everybody else's comments and reflections.
Yep. You know, this is a big topic. I think it's very, very much about building governance structures. We have way too few such governance structures. It touches us personally. I mean, if you get a heart attack and the ambulance can't come because some foreign power has turned it off, that would be terrible. But we also saw in Norway a few years back that a health software was sending patient data to India. Nobody knew about it. It was discovered by the IT staff, and they escalated that through their labor union, and that's how it reached the government. The government itself doesn't have necessarily reporting funnels for those kind of issues. And I think we're moving from a situation where we didn't really care about digital sovereignty. Now it's coming up as one of the major issues that we have to tackle. And there is no perfect solution, but being aware, I think, is the first step.
Thank you, Mathias, for helping raise awareness, helping us educate all of us. I think this is a shared journey that we are at the beginning of. Like you said, Mathias, it wasn't really a topic until a few years ago. Thank you, everybody, for joining on this afternoon, morning. Much appreciated. I'll share everything later. We'll keep the conversation going and hope to see many of you in person again soon. Thank you. Thank you, Mathias.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.